Let's talk product.
Yeah, let's do it.
So why don't we get started with your own story? How did you get started into this whole product tech scene?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a weird one. I went to school for computer science back in the late 80s and early 90s. So I have the fortunate position of having been working on web technology for my entire professional career. And I came up through the ranks in software development and then engineering leadership coming out of that. But most of the time when working in software as a service products, I've been working at smaller companies. So it's given me a lot of exposure to how product works and how all the other arms of a smaller to medium business work. I joined UserVoice about 5 years ago now as their VP of engineering. And I was very attracted to it because as an engineering leader, the primary driver of our work has always been the product team. And if there's one complaint engineers might give you, it's not having enough justification for why an engineer is being asked to build something from a product team. And UserVoice as a company aimed to solve that problem. So it was really appealing for me to join. After about 4 years, Rich, the CEO, and I decided that we both wanted to explore both new products and take fresh eyes at UserVoice, which is a 12-year-old product at this point. So he decided to work on new projects, and I'm currently both the head of product and president and running the Core UserVoice product right now.
So I remember first time I got introduced to UserVoice was many years ago. I was in a hackathon, actually, and Rich was giving a talk. I'm like, what is this? And this is awesome. And it's incredible to see how much it has evolved. Like you said, 12 years now. So can you give me an idea of the stage of the business today?
Sure. UserVoice got started as I think one of the first ways to offer product feedback. It was relatively unusual to have a web property where you could solicit feedback from the users of your product or put a widget into your application that asks people for feedback. And that's become pretty ubiquitous now. I think there's a lot of tools out there to do that. Over the years, we've been evolving our technology skills to be able to help you make sense of all that qualitative feedback that's coming in. Over the years, end users have become much more vocal about what they're expecting to have happen and expecting responsiveness from a product team when they say that a feature should be there. So we want to make sure that for all that feedback's coming in, we can point you to the most important stuff and facilitate the ongoing conversations with your user base to keep them engaged. These days, I think the use of technology and digging through very random text that's coming your way is something that has become a possibility and something that we're working heavily on right now.
I'm just curious, when you guys started, were you thinking about product managers are some of your primary users, or was it a different persona?
Well, I wasn't there at the beginning. And I think that at the time UserVoice started, the notion of selling software that was software as a service was really an unusual thing. So at that time, organizations didn't necessarily have product managers. That's a discipline that's been growing over the past decade, but still to this day is probably not as clearly defined as a role like a software engineer or a sales leader or something like that. Definitely product managers are the kind of people who make the greatest use of our tools today, although we're noticing a lot of increasing interest in customer-facing teams like customer success. They really have a vested interest in knowing what end users are asking for because they're obliged to keep them happy, keep them retained, and keep them customers. So product managers are probably 75% of the consumers of product feedback that comes in these days. But sales, support, and success increasingly are really interested in having access to that data. So we're needing to start to understand some more personas as the years go along.
So you know that we always say in product management that you have to fall in love with the problem and not with the solution. In your particular case, what are some of those problems that you are most passionate about?
Yeah, the evidence behind, anecdotal evidence is very motivational to a software engineer working on a product, to a designer working on a product, and hearing in the customer's words what pain is caused by a weakness in the software or a problem that they're trying to solve or a job they're trying to get done. is very motivational. So that's number one. In terms of actually getting response to stuff that you deliver in product rather than throwing it out there into the world and just watching behavioral analytics come in. When you have the facility for people to say, oh, this is great, this really helped solve my problem, that's the pat on the back that you never get. So those two things really, I think, are things that product teams need to stay motivated and focused on the right stuff.
And I'm glad how you're talking about it, because I see that you come from an engineering background. I do too. And I didn't learn any of this in school. It was very tactical, pretty much like it either works or it doesn't work. It compiles or it doesn't. So I'm curious, now that you are leading product at UserVoice, which is also a product for product people, what's been some of that evolution for you?
Yeah, I have definitely had to be very conscious of dropping my expectations of engineering, like using that filter of this is hard, this is easy, this is practical, this is impractical, is something that it can be limiting, right? If you want to think about the best solutions, it's really helpful to not think about how hard it is right away. You really want to think about the problem you're solving and how you could solve it. And it might not be with the difficult technology solution. On the flip side, that's also a benefit. We understand what is difficult and what is not difficult if you come from an engineering background. I think that the ability to understand and analyze data is something that you learn in engineering that you don't necessarily learn if you come up into product through design or through business. There's a whole host of pros and cons, I think, in the different pathways to get to product management. And I would say that if you ask my team, the thing that's probably the most annoying about having an engineering person in the product seat is how logical we are. And a lot of product management is driven by passion and emotion. So being self-conscious of that, I think, has been very helpful, because I'm definitely surrounded by a team. And it's not to say that I'm not passionate and emotional about what we do, but they'll definitely share it with me. Like, Matt, you're being too logical. Move on from it. It's been an interesting change for sure.
We all have biases. We're trying to formalize the product management industry in a way. And when we started 6 years ago, most of our students actually came from software engineering backgrounds. That was also my background. But we've seen this evolution. And there are now many more backgrounds. Obviously, engineering is still big, but we see business, we see design, marketing, support, operations, sometimes people who are not even within tech, like we had attorneys, and there's no one silver bullet. So it's good to know that you have some of those traits of your previous professional background, which makes you very special. And I think that's something that it's important when we talk to PMs to try to match with the needs of the company, because product management is very different in every organization, right? So there will be some organizations that would appreciate that logical aspect. There will be others that would be very different. So I'm also curious, in your case, you guys are building a customer-facing product. So what is the role of product management, and what are some of those traits that you see in your product team?
Wow. Obviously, we're a feedback product. So feedback is, it doesn't drive everything that we do. I think that one of the misconceptions we get in people that come to UserVoice is that they think that by putting a product feedback tool in place, it means you're going into reactive mode, that you're letting customer feedback drive everything that you do. That's not true for us, and it's not true for most of our customers, and it's not true for most organizations. But I would say that a trait that's true of all of the people that work at UserVoice is that we're very interested in listening to customers. I like what you said about the different backgrounds that come into product management, because I think good ideas can come from anywhere. And one thing that I see in a lot of product organizations that I didn't like in previous places that I'd been is where that's kind of a black box, right? The good ideas in product seem to be coming from an executive team or a product leader or something like that. And it's a little bit defeating to all the people that are really on board with your team and really passionate about building something successful. So it's really important to me, and I think it's easier for me, knowing that I have an engineering background, to be more deferential to good ideas coming in from the team. So I think an openness to ideas, not only from our end users, but from any employee. I don't care if they just joined yesterday. In fact, if they did just join yesterday, they probably have a really nice objective viewpoint that will help us shake some of the rust off.
Now, I would like to double click on what you said about some organizations that tend to impose decisions from the top. Especially, I think it's also because CEOs come from a technical or product background, and they're so passionate about their baby that even though the companies grow, they still want to make sure that their ideas are being heard. And I also had to learn that the hard way. So you guys can also drink your own champagne, because I guess that you'll probably be using UserVoice internally. And how do you handle all of the ideas or feedback that would come from your own product team, from your executive team, but at the same time from other teams who are not directly working in product?
Yeah, it's a great question, because one of the things that when I get into discussions with other product managers, I really ask them how they set their product strategy. And I ask them on two different levels. How do you decide kind of what's to do? What do you want to do next? Like, what's in the next sprint? What's in the next month? Versus strategic planning. And everyone will tell you that there's a great many variables that go into that. We use UserVoice to understand like what our customers are telling us directly. We capture feedback both from end users and from people like salespeople, from customer success managers. The value of the feedback coming from sales and success managers is really nice, because they are empathetic with the customer. Their job is to make the customer happy. They know the product well, so they can express the feedback in terms that are very understandable to the product team. But they're also kind of a confidant to the customer. It's not as if a customer telling a salesperson that they don't like something is going to embarrass the product team, which might happen if they were talking directly to the product team. So we get these really nice avenues of communication. So we get all that stuff together. A lot of companies will use a scoring mechanism, taking in feedback, taking in some visionary work, competitive analysis, research that they're doing. We do all of those things as well. And I think you'll notice as many different processes as there are companies out there in product management. But I think the study of product management, which is one of the reasons I think, Carlos, what you're doing is so important by presenting so many different views, will help people pick from a highly variable toolkit of things that are available to them. There are some things that I think are super important to everything. You need to do competitive analysis. You need to do market research. You need customer feedback. You need good old plain brainstorming and hard work in creating ideas. For us, we set goals, we set mission, we set vision. We try to make sure that what we're doing is always aligned with that, whether the idea comes from a PM, a president, a CEO, past or present, and just try to be really careful. I know I'm talking for a long time about this because it's been one of the biggest struggles in our evolution as a 12-year-old product. We actually switched over to use ShapeUp, the Basecamp methodology for building product. It's been world-changing for us. A huge amount of benefit for us, ascribing value to things that we want to build in product and making sure everyone's got a say in it.
Yeah, and I think that democratizing access to sharing your ideas, it's really powerful because it puts almost everyone on the same page. Yes, it's true that you see who created that idea, that ticket, but you can also see who else is supporting that idea. And then if you add this other variable, which is the impact that can have on business or the effort that it can take to implement, it helps you shape that strategy for your organization. So I'm a big fan of opening up the meeting room to other people, because long time ago we assumed that best ideas don't come just from the founder or the president or whoever joined first.
Yeah, and it can get you in trouble, in fact. So
absolutely.
when you do open up the room, a lot of people are fearful of saying no to people, and I know that no one really likes that. But if you're forced to do it and explain why, most people leave very satisfied from that conversation. And if you find yourself struggling with explaining why you wouldn't do something, that might be a hint for you that there's more research to do, that you might not be convinced yourself.
Yeah, well, actually, there are no more meeting rooms, at least for the term to COVID. So I also want to explore that with you. Obviously, you guys have a SaaS product, but has this new environment shaped your roadmap in any way?
It has. I think I assumed the president role in UserVoice in November of last year, and the pandemic hit at around March. So it was a little bit of a double whammy for us. Like, we were already kind of reshaping the way we work because I was, changing in place. And then suddenly there's a big economic change and all of us are working from home. So unprecedented times for everyone to learn new tricks. For us, and I think for a lot of companies, it caused us to be really deliberate and much more focused in justifying the things that we did without getting paralyzed over it. We were trying to make sure that we were doing the things that were going to meet whatever our goals were. A lot of people were nervous about the economic downturn potentially raising churn or putting new business at risk. And it raised a lot of questions like, which of these should we focus on? How could we be satisfied that by implementing feature A, B, or C, that's going to allow us to get new business or prevent churn? And that's, I think, caused us to double down on what you mentioned, Carlos, which is making sure that all the data that we had available to us was being used in its best possible way.
And what are some other trends that you've seen in general, not just for your particular product, but like for product people trying to build products during this time?
Yeah, I think all of us are trying to be a little bit more conservative in how we spend resources that are available to us. Be that, money on tools, headcount in getting things done. I think that most people who run SaaS businesses are, unless you're in one of those situations that's directly benefiting from a pandemic, like the Zooms of the world or something like that, people are being a lot more cautious about the value propositions of tools that they're buying. And on the flip side, the value proposition of software that they're developing in their own products. I think that's a positive thing. I think it's forcing us to get into a position where we're being much more deliberate about the process by which we evaluate the systems that we put in place, the products that we build. So I think it's forcing a lot of growth in people's use of data, in how they make decisions in product, not only in what they're purchasing, but what they're building.
And I think that's a great point. There's a constant question around building versus buying. It's always there. And now we see how people are being more conscious around where to put their efforts, because if there is something that works at least 80% the way they would like, maybe it's better to buy in this case instead of just building in-house and spending a ton of time and resources. So I think part of it also is that now there are a lot of tools built for product managers, which is incredible. Like back in the day,
didn't exist.
Right? We're piggybacking on PowerPoint, spreadsheets, or whatever it was to do our job. And actually accessing data was a hard work, was very technical. You had to know SQL and a bunch of other things, set up servers, connect databases. Now, a lot of visual tools that are so simple that help PMs focus on the stuff that they are best at instead of trying to play engineer or designer.
Yeah.
So I also want to explore that with you a little bit more, because your tool, obviously, I've used it. It's pretty visual, and it's not just for PMs, as we were saying before. But what are some of the ways that you think an organization that is considering to start collecting feedback from, not just internally, but also from customers, what would be the best way for them to get the most out of it?
I think the first is a lot of people get very anxious about starting to collect feedback because they feel in some way obligated to reply to all of it. And I think everyone knows that that's just impractical to do. However, there's some very, very tangible benefits to using a feedback collection tool beyond just in the consumption of information for a product team to know what people are asking for. A lot of people don't think about the fact that it's a really good way to source an audience for something like a beta test, or if you want to put 2 or 3 designs in front of someone or talk to people about what they're interested in. Because if you're collecting feedback, you can also see who asked for it. So instead of having to, march down the hallway, if you had a hallway anymore, and find out from customer success who their their favorite customers are. It helps you avoid going to the same 5 customers all the time that are keep giving you the same feedback, and takes you out of that echo chamber of the usual suspects that they talk to. So a tool like UserVoice really lets you know for a particular topic who's interested, who are you going to get good feedback from. Another thing that's really nice about having a system to collect feedback, we recently introduced Slack integration. So kind of an unexpected byproduct of that is we now radiate all the feedback coming in through UserVoice out to a Slack channel if you use Slack at your company. And that means that everyone in the company can see the feedback that's coming in. And it makes them part of the team to help solve the problem. And since we started using this at UserVoice, the general awareness of what people are asking for is going way up. And because of that, you find from the places you least expect it, people volunteering to help you solve a problem. So you're sort of de facto growing the product team while increasing transparency. So tools like that are just really helpful for getting everyone rowing the boat in the same direction.
I think that's really awesome. We use Slack internally and have multiple channels depending on the feedback that we want to provide on which part of the business. And I'm getting that idea of, making even more accessible to others to not just let them ask, but also see what's going on with their feedback.
Yep. And you almost get some advocacy. Like if there's someone hiding in your sales organization that's too shy to tell you that they really feel like something is there, but a big customer drops feedback in a tool and it shows up in Slack, that person can raise their hand and say, yes, me too. This is what I was saying. And now there's evidence to help them. And I think it creates a sense of relief for people when they have outside advocacy for something.
And what are other tools that are part of your product stack?
Yeah, we use Figma quite a bit. Our designer uses Figma, but our engineering team really likes it because we also use InVision. They both allow for discussion back and forth. So that perennial problem where the designer, you want them to think blue sky and come up with the best possible thing, but that 10% thing that they did that blows the estimate for building it way out of proportion, they can have a good conversation right there, and then it creates tools for them. We use Gainsight PX for analytics and for guides. I think having an analytics system is, of course, table stakes these days. Having guides to help to point out new functionality to people is really important. The really nice thing about that is that's all tied into our customer success platform because we use Gainsight for that as well. And UserVoice actually integrates with Gainsight. So you now get this 360-degree view of what a customer wants on the product team, in the success team, everywhere. So I think the tools that we're favoring most are ones that integrate across the whole company. Slack is another good example there that we use a lot.
Well, thank you. And just to wrap things up, I want to ask you a question about the future of product management. It's always evolving. As you said, when you guys started, product management probably existed, but it wasn't really as hot as it is today. When we started 6 years ago, we had to really do a lot of work educating the market and explaining things about how product management is different from project management, or why product management is important. And it's not just, and it's different from engineering or other functions. So for people who are now considering to either break into product, or existing PMs who want to continue learning and growing, where do you think are the biggest opportunities?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think product management is one of the most rapidly evolving roles that's happening today. The thing that's been most beneficial, I think, to product managers that I've worked with and myself is to have as much involvement in other areas of the business as possible. When you understand how the bottom line is affected by what product does in terms of understanding retention metrics, understanding how a sales team works, it makes you empathetic to their pain points. It makes a salesperson more likely to open up to you, or a success manager who's responsible for retention to open up to you. So I think that most product managers are very inquisitive. They have an inquisitive mindset. So learning as much as you can about what an engineer does, what a salesperson does, is really beneficial. The second thing I think that would be really useful is, Carlos, you mentioned like all this data is now available to us, and tools are getting better and better at presenting interesting information to you. But I think the perspective that we see in UserVoice is that product managers don't necessarily know the right questions to ask. So we at UserVoice are trying to figure out, we're trying to figure that out for you, but we're never going to be able to handle every specific case in the end user. So your ability to analyze data, not talking about SQL or anything like that, but just saying, hey, I wish I knew the answer to this, and that would help me know whether to take path or A or B, would be a really useful skill to grow.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Matt. It's been great to learn from you. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, this is fantastic. Carlos, thanks a ton for the work that you do. We are always interested as well in just talking shop with product managers. I'm also interested in talking to people about the way engineering teams work. So if any of you want to just chew the fat over a product, we'd be happy to get in touch with any of you. So look us up. We'd love to talk.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Take care.